Good afternoon. If you'll please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Individuals wishing to address the City Council are requested to complete a speaker card and deliver it to the City Clerk staff prior to the item being heard by the City Council. Please observe a 3-minute limit for communications, and once called upon to speak, please state your name and city of residence for the record. Communications from the public. This portion of the agenda is intended for general public comment on items within the Council's jurisdiction that are not listed elsewhere on the agenda. Please note that the state law prohibits the City Council from discussing or taking action on these items. Please observe a 3-minute time limit for comments, and once called upon to speak, please state your name and city of residence for the record. Ms. Edwards, are there any speaker cards from the public?
Mayor, we do not have any speaker cards for public comment.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to our first agenda.
Mayor, you have someone.
Oh, could you please come up to the lectern there, sir? Yes, sir.
Sorry, I didn't realize I had to fill out a card.
No worries.
That's okay.
How's this?
There you go.
Okay. My name is Juan Ramirez. I live at 2844 James Street here, Corona, 92881. I built my house and it was finalized in 1973. We are on septic. There are 8 houses on that short street. The sewer line is there within feet of connecting. I've been trying for quite a long time to get the city to connect the line. On the first attempt, I got an engineering company and it was $3,000 per unit. City ignored it, and now I came back several times. At one point, I was quoted $50,000 to connect my house, and I said I wouldn't just because, of course, it was expensive just for me. And I was told the city would wait until my house failed so I could connect because I couldn't improve my septic system. Within the last 2 years, the house straight across from me put in a new pit, and they got the permits from the city. Jillian has been working on a project for that section, and I believe it's been approved. She sent it out for bid. When it came back, it was too high, so we ignored it. So my thoughts are the city can continue to ignore it, or maybe it would be possible for the city to at least take 50% of the cost and let's just drive that thing in, because we have all the homes around us connected, but we are not able to do that because of the cost. And the city, of course, has to jump in and do its work.
Is that it?
That would be it. Maybe we can have a later meeting with a little bit more time and discussion so we could review it.
Okay, I appreciate your comment. Mr. Ellis, who would be the best person to talk to about permitting for, is that
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I can have someone from our Planning and Development Department follow up.
perfect?
Juliana has the work completed already. And I believe you already approved the project.
Okay, we'll have someone reach out to you. I don't discount what you're saying, sir. I just don't know the particulars behind it. So we'll have someone reach out to you if that's all right.
That would be great.
If you wanted to leave your contact information with the city clerk, and that way we can get a hold of you.
And Mr. Ramirez, just, we're not able to have a back and forth discussion since this wasn't on the agenda before us, but we'll reach back out.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, moving on to our quiet zone feasibility study. Mr. Aaron Cox, Senior Engineer Traffic, will present the item. That doesn't sound right. Senior Engineer Traffic, Senior Engineering of Traffic?
Okay, so it's a little complicated because in the state of California, a traffic engineer is a title. It's a registered title. I'm a PE, but not a TE yet, so I can't use the term traffic engineer. So senior engineer, traffic engineering.
Thank you.
That's what you got. But thanks for the icebreaker.
All right.
All right. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm Aaron Cox, Senior Engineer Traffic Engineering. And I'm here to talk to you about the Quiet Zone feasibility study that Public Works recently completed. And the ask is that council direct staff on moving forward with one of 3 quiet zone strategies. Option A, pursue a quiet zone along the mainline corridor. Option B, pursue a quiet zone along the mainline and the spur corridor in Corona. And option C, we take a strategic pause. A little bit of background on what is a quiet zone. So as you may know, a quiet zone is a segment of rail that crosses roadways through a city where train horns are not routinely sounded at these crossings. A quiet zone needs to be a minimum of a half mile in length. That's because trains have to honk a quarter mile in advance from each side. And there is the caveat that even with a quiet zone, a train still can blow its horn at a grade crossing for emergency situations. A little history on this request. In April of 2021, City Council asked staff to investigate the feasibility of implementing quiet zones in the city. Later that year, in November, City Council approved the development of a quiet zone feasibility study, which we would assess scope, cost, and schedule to develop quiet zones in the city. And later in 2022, in October, we finally had a diagnostic meeting, which was comprised of key personnel from the city, BNSF, CPUC, and FRA, Federal Railway Administration. Here's an overview of the quiet zones in Corona that we would be pursuing. The yellow circles are the San Bernardino subdivisions. This is the main line through the city of Corona that we're all really familiar with. Corona has already grade separated several streets in the city, so these are the remaining 6 at-grade crossings on the main line. So it's Smith, Railroad, Coda, Sheridan, Joy, and Radio. And the Porphyry Spur is the subdivision that goes south toward the rock mines by Cajalco. And there's 2 crossings, one at 6th Street and one at Magnolia. A little more quiet zone overview. The basis for a quiet zone is in the Federal Code of Regulations. To determine if you're eligible for a quiet zone, there are calculations you need to research and complete. Basically, the elimination of train horns at a crossing must be counteracted with additional safety measures. If you take the horn away, you have to put other safety measures in. These are comprised of supplemental safety measures, things like median islands, channelizations, additional crossing gates. There's alternative safety measures, education enforcement, or partial SSMs. And you can incorporate other safety enhancements that were presented at the diagnostic meeting. So briefly, here's some research and calculations that went into the quiet zone calculation. Out of this whole chart, the most important data is it's comprised of the volume of trains, the volume of vehicles at all of these crossings, and the accident history at these crossings, both vehicles, trains, and pedestrians. We plug all this into the Quiet Zone Calculator, which is an FRA website. And basically, your crossings with supplemental safety measures, these SSMs, needs to be less than the nationwide threshold risk index with horn. So if you're taking away the horn, you have to have these supplemental safety features. Lucky for us, both of our proposed quiet zone corridors have a pretty good track record, and they were both eligible for quiet zones. And the supplemental safety measure that the city and the railroads preferred was raised median islands at all of these crossings. So now I'm going to show you the conceptual quiet zone designs and the supplemental safety measures that we are proposing. So at the mainline crossings, we're going to work west to east. And at North Smith Avenue, these are the existing conditions. Pretty industrial area, 4 lanes, standard gates. And the conceptual improvements we're planning to, or we would be installing as part of a quiet zone project would be to install raised medians. The railroad would want upgraded warning devices, upgraded signaling, and various other railroad equipment. And for us, we'd also have to update probably the pavement and the sign and striping elements to the latest METCD standards. Similarly, at Railroad Street, 4 lanes, has existing gates. And I'll probably date myself here. I remember when this didn't have gates at this crossing. It was pretty neat. And I think they got replaced in 1990. Used to have wigwags, so we all know how efficient those were. And also a very industrial area, 3 tracks in this area. And similarly, our conceptual improvements are raised median islands, updated striping, and the railroad wants to update all of its warning equipment for this crossing. Next, we have CODA, as we're all pretty familiar with if we ever visit our city courtyard. 1 lane each direction, has median islands, standard 2-quadrant gates. And again, raised median islands, upgraded warning devices, and this one is close enough to a signalized intersection that the railroad also would like to see an interlink or a preemption with the signal at railroad and CODA. So it adds a little bit of cost to this. Next up, we have Sheridan, also a very industrial area, 1 lane each way, has existing median islands as part of it. These would be extended to meet quiet zone rules, and which is minimum 100 foot long. Again, signal preemption is required here because it's so close to the intersection of Railroad and Sheridan, and we would update the sign and striping elements to the latest standard. Moving right along east to Joy Street. This is an existing crossing, 2 lanes each way, has some medians and overhead gantry. And our conceptual improvements would be to extend those medians. The railroad again wants its upgraded warning devices and signaling. And we would update the sign and striping to the latest MUTCD standards. And lastly, Radio Road. This is a 3-track crossing. It's existing 1 lane each way, standard 2-quadrant gates. Pavement could use some love out here, but we're working on a project with that. Here is our conceptual improvement for this area. Upgraded median islands, upgraded warning devices, sign and striping. And what's neat about this particular crossing is it was selected for $3.4 million of federal funding from the U.S. Section 130 grant. So we're already embarking on a project to install safety features, which actually are raised median islands, pavement improvements, pedestrian treatments, et cetera. And these will also make it quiet zone ready. The federal grant cannot pay for a quiet zone, but it can pay for features that also fall under a quiet zone. Moving along to the Porphyry Spur crossings. Our first crossing is over at 6th Street. And this is a pretty modern crossing compared to a lot of the other ones in the city. And with that being said, it has minimal improvements that are required. There might be some preemption improvements here because there's a signalized intersection, but for the most part, it's updating sign and striping elements to the latest standard. And lastly, we have our Magnolia crossing. Here's the existing conditions. We note that it's currently 2 lanes, but we have a project coming in. There's a developer project and a Public Works CIP project to widen Magnolia along the frontage from El Camino to the Magnolia Bridge, essentially. And the CIP and developer project will include the widening of Magnolia, and which means it has to update the crossing to what we're showing here. There would be minimal cost to this because this should be included in the CIP project scope, and which the developer will be paying a portion of. And the improvement timeline for this is depending on funding of the CIP Magnolia widening project. And lastly, the diagnostic meeting. So in October, we attended a field diagnostic meeting, and in attendance was us, our city staff for City of Corona, our chosen consultant, JM Diaz. BNSF was there, Amtrak, Metrolink, CPUC, who regulates grade crossings in the state of California, and the Federal Railway Administration. As you can see, it was a pretty popular meeting, and we spent all day visiting 8 crossings in the city, made some good friends. And at the diagnostic meeting, we presented our research, our calculations, and our conceptual designs and which SSMs, the supplemental safety measures, to the group on site. We discussed the requirements and the betterments that consider the geometric needs of both the roadway, the railway, what kind of crossing equipment, signaling equipment, all the operational needs that go into a grade crossing, and how it would interface with traffic signals in the area. Surface needs, so we're looking at pavement, sidewalk, pedestrian access, curb ramps, how do bicycles get through these crossings, and behavioral needs. How do we, deter risky behavior from drivers and pedestrians? And the diagnostic meeting concludes the feasibility study that the city embarked on. The multi-agency diagnostic meeting brought some great feedback to our designs, which we incorporate and helps us create cost and would make future refined improvement plans. And based upon these findings and recommendations from the whole group, the quiet zone implementation strategies were developed. I'm about to present those to you. So here are our strategies and options. So strategy A is just the mainline corridor. We would design and construct 6 quiet zone crossings along the mainline corridor, and we would need to allocate $14 million in estimated design and construction costs from city funds. Option B would be the mainline and the spur crossings, which is 6 quiet zone crossings along the mainline and 2 quiet zone crossings along the Porphyry Spur. We would need to allocate up to $16 million in estimated funding for design and construction. And then option C is the strategic pause or the status quo, where BNSF, Metrolink, and RCTC may be considering rail improvements through Corona. We would partner with BNSF, Metrolink, and RCTC as a key stakeholder, and any improvements they do, we would condition them to be quiet zone ready. When these quiet zone ready improvements are installed, staff would bring this back to council for direction on quiet zone implementation. Now I'll take a deeper dive into option A. So the pros would be, we would be mitigating up to 100 train horns per day per crossing. And another pro is that Radio Road safety improvements fall under the quiet zone improvements, and that's being paid by others. The cons, we would need to allocate $14 million. It's got a 4 to 5 year schedule. And if BNSF or Metrolink or RCTC decide to do rail improvements through the city, such as additional trackage, these might be throwaway improvements. Option B, we would still be mitigating up to 100 train horns per day per crossing. Magnolia widening CIP and the developer projects will ensure that crossing is quiet zone ready as part of their project. And we anticipate funding of those improvements for the Magnolia crossing would mostly be funded by others. In the cons of this, we have a $16 million allocation we would need from city funds, a slightly longer 4 to 6 year project schedule. By adding the spur crossings, we are only mitigating approximately 2 trains per week on the spur track. And the mainline quiet zones similarly would be a throwaway if BNSF, Metrolink, or RCTC decide to do railway improvements through the city. And lastly, option C is we take a strategic pause or we keep the status quo. And the pros of this is when or if mainline improvements are designed and constructed by others, we can condition them to be quiet zone ready. The Magnolia Bridge widening and the Radio Road project will include quiet zone ready improvements already. And the design and construction costs for all these crossing updates would be borne by others. We estimate up to $1 million to process 2 quiet zone applications for this in the future. The cons, there's no guarantee that BNSF, Metrolink, or RCTC will move forward with railway improvements. There's an unknown timeline, and there's no near-term reduction of train horn noise. So with that, I'll summarize the options once more. Option A is that we pursue a mainline corridor implementation strategy for 6 quiet zones, $14 million, 4 to 5 year project schedule. Option B is we embark on a quiet zone project for both mainline and the spur corridors. So that's the 6 mainline crossings, the 2 Magnolia and 6th Street crossings. We would need to allocate $16 million in funding, and it's a slightly longer 4 to 6 year project schedule. And option C is we take a strategic pause and see what our neighboring agencies would like to do, BNSF, Metrolink, and RCTC. And if they move forward, we can condition them to make quiet zone ready improvements at all these crossings. And when those improvements are done, we would come back to City Council to move forward, to ask for direction to move forward with implementation of quiet zones. And the ask is that Council direct us on one of these 3 strategies. And if you have any questions, I'm here. I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Edwards, are there any speaker cards from the public?
Mayor, we do not have any speaker cards for this item.
Okay. Then I will start with you, Mr. Speak. I'm sure I think you brought this.
I did.
I think we both got asked, but you got to it before I did.
Thank you for the presentation. It's really good. It's very nice to see something come from an idea to getting close. I think one of the original, ideas behind this was for us to have something that's ready to be able to take advantage when and if someone comes forward, and when and if, I think at that point we didn't know what all the details were going to be for the transportation bill and what they were going to fund, and we happened to find a little bit of funding, at least for one project. So I'm very confident. I have a lot of discussions with BNSF, and I look at the CTC's spending and where they're prioritizing their investments, and they're primarily on the rail side. There's going to be rail expansion. There has to be rail expansion. It's part of the active transportation plan for all of California is to try and get trucks off the road, to transfer more folks onto the rail. So I'm all in favor of is it option C, 3? I can't remember. There we go.
Correct, option C.
Option C. With us an opportunity, if there is something that we can come back, if it doesn't happen for, we don't see any movement, or there's additional items, maybe we can revisit. But I do think that this is exactly what we asked, is to get us ready so we wouldn't have to start from scratch. We have a little bit of investment up front, and then be able to provide our residents with, frankly, I see this as an equity issue. The folks that live down there have been suffering for this for a long time, and if we can find an opportunity for them to get it to go forward, then where it wasn't even considered before. So I'm very happy about that. So thank you.
Councilmember Casillas?
Yes, thank you. First of all, I think this was the first time that we saw the new presentation
The colors?
slides.
Yeah.
It was really great. I liked it. I was wondering, and I think you might have answered this question. So Radio Road has a grant, and it makes it quiet zone ready, but it won't pay for a quiet zone. What's the cost to apply for a quiet zone?
That is a great question, and to us, it's kind of unknown. There's a big railway application, and, one quiet zone would be for the main line, one quiet zone would be for the spur. So it's two separate applications, and we don't quite know until we move forward with a step 2 to see, how many planned reviews it would go. But that's why we have kind of a large conservative number in there, for the application of the quiet zone. So all those numbers we presented are really conservative.
Got it. So then an application covers the entire line. So we have 6 stops in one line. So one application would cover all 6, even if we didn't pursue change. Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. And then there's no guarantee, but we have a good idea that railway improvements might happen.
Coming.
They're coming.
Like the train, it's coming.
The train is coming. And this might be really, really silly, and I don't know if I missed it, but I don't understand what a median island is. Can you explain that to me?
Happily. Okay, let me go back to one of these. So a
I'm
raised...
really happy right now. You get to explain what a median island is.
I'm an engineer. This is in my blood. Let's go right here. So Radio Road, for example. The dark line down the middle of the center line of the roadway is literally a curb and gutter, 6 to 9 inches tall, that to discourage someone from driving over it to go against traffic and through a gate that doesn't exist. So if you've ever seen someone make that really risky behavior where they drive around a bunch of cars and cut diagonally through the crossing, that's what that's to avoid.
Got it. Okay. Now I get it. Lastly, in commentary, no more questions, but I agree. I remember the context when we were bringing this up. It's the idea of having more shovel-ready projects. And now this is shovel-ready. In essence, we know what it would cost to get this done. So we can, hopefully, ideally, be on the receiving end of any railway improvements or grants that get us, what we're having at Radio Road, which can make them quiet zone ready, until we're ready to go for all of it. And I really like the idea of finding these funds somewhere else. And maybe this is something that we add to our platform for both the state legislator and our federal asks. So I'm also in favor of option C. a strategic pause, because there might be other ways to achieve this. But thank you so much for the study.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I'm option C as well, but there was a while back, there was a resident that came and complained about train horns, and he was hearing them all the time, and so I don't think that dude's gonna be too happy waiting for 5-10 years. So do you remember what intersection that was at?
I want to say,
I actually believe it was when the train came into Corona. It wasn't the one that I'm thinking of, the resident was not a man, it was a woman.
Or woman?
That lived in my district and could hear it all the way by River and Corydon, which is true. I can confirm, I can hear it as well.
Okay, well, I'm option C, but I think we should be alert to if citizens complain, maybe we bump it up 1 or 2 a little earlier, and that's where I would be at.
Yeah. So I'm option C as well, and I want to acknowledge that the train can be heard for miles. And like I said, my house is River and Corydon, almost at the north end of the city, and I can hear the train coming in from Orange County. So, I do recognize that a lot of this is industrial space, but it doesn't matter. That horn carries. It's a horn. It's a train horn to alert you of something that could be disastrous. So, but I really love the idea. 2 things. I love the idea that that we hope to use somebody else's money, which is what we love here.
my favorite money.
It is our favorite money. But I also want to recognize that we all are aware that there's going to be more trains in the next 5 to 10 years. So while we're at 100 trains today, it's going to be 150, 200 tomorrow, which is really weird. Having worked at Ganal for many years, listening to that train, I don't even hear it anymore most of the time. So it's very interesting to me. But I'm also option C as well. Thank you for putting this together. This is very complete, and on our end, I think that we can go after some of the state and federal lobbies to see if we can come up with some money for it. So I appreciate it very much. Thank you. Moving on to item number 2, discussion of the city's short-term residential rental ordinance. Ms. Coletta, Planning and Development Director, will present this item.
Thank you and good afternoon. As you indicated, we're here to have a discussion on the city's short-term residential rental ordinance. And of course, there's always an ask. So the ask today is for the council to have the council consider if they want to make changes to our ordinance based on one of the options that's going to be proposed by staff this afternoon. Just a real quick background. Our short-term residential rental ordinance is governed by the municipal code, and that was adopted in 2017. And there is a general definition that is defined. And really what it is, it's the rental of any legally permitted dwelling unit or a rental of any portion of a legally permitted dwelling unit for a period of 30 consecutive days or less. We do collect a transit occupancy tax on short-term rentals because we do have a voluntary collection agreement with Airbnb, and the TOT that the city charges is 10% of the rent charge. We do allow 2 types of short-term rentals. One is a non-host rental. What that means is that the regular occupant of the property or the property owner does not reside on the property when it's being rented. And then you also have host rentals where the primary occupant or property owner does reside on the premise when the property is rented. So it can be an either-or situation. When it comes to our requirements, we do require a city business license. There's also an annual permit that the operator is required to get. And as I indicated, they make that TOT payment to the city through the Airbnb collection agreement. This here is just a chart showing you the TOT that's been collected on Airbnbs over time since we enacted that agreement. But something for the council to note, overall, our TOT revenue in fiscal year 22 was $3.2 million, and that includes the TOT we get from hotels. So you could see that hotels are the main driver of the revenue when it comes to the collection of TOT. What you see there on the chart above you, Starting in about 2020, year over year, there was only about a $10,000 increase when it comes to the short-term rentals. So it's a very small fraction of what you get in total TOT. This here is just some of the rental requirements. We do require the operator to comply with our Good Neighbor brochure. It's really redundant of what's in our municipal code, but really they should not be generating any loud and unnecessary noises. Trash should not be within public view. And on-site parking should be on the driveway, garage, or carport area. And then the occupancy is allowed 2 people per bedroom plus 1 person per unit. There does need to be a designated local contact that is available. We do require a 2-person minimum, and 1 person does need to be available 24 hours a day when that unit is being rented. And the contact information does need to be located on the exterior of the dwelling within plain view. And also the designated local contact should be able to respond to the location within 45 minutes of receiving a complaint. The city does have penalty and enforcement when it comes to short-term rentals. Our code compliance staff can issue a notice of violation when they receive initial complaint. And if that complaint is deemed valid, then we can go ahead and start our initiation with the notice of violation. If that violation is repeatedly continuing to happen, we then move to administrative citations. And as you see there, that's our table when it comes to issuing citations. It is a graduated scale. So it does gradually increase each time you have a repeated violation for the same violation. Administrative citations can be appealed. Anybody has 10 working days to appeal our citation if they have evidence stating that they should not have received that citation. And then when it comes to revoking a permit, that is under the discretion of the director of the department. And they do look at the situation and the case notes and all of the information that's been obtained by staff. And again, if a permit is revoked, they will get the same appeal rights as those that receive administrative citations. This here is just a status of the current permits that we have on file. So we currently have 13 active permits. None have been denied. However, we have received 2 permits, have received complaints. We have issued administrative citations to 1 permit, and then there was also 1 permit that was revoked. And normal complaints that we receive are noise, suspicious subjects, and renters and parking on the street. So these are the options that were presented to the City Council to consider. I'm sure you've all had time to look at them. So one option is just to keep the ordinance as adopted. Really just provide short-term residential rental opportunity within the city. And we allow both host and non-host. Really the con on this, and the con is going to be the same for the first 3 options, is that it does allow short-term rental in residential neighborhoods. And the other con is that staff does spend time on responding to the complaints that are received. Option 2 would be to reduce it down to a host only. This means that the person who owns the property or the occupant would be there on the premise while the property is rented. It could likely ease complaints from the city because they can actually address those being that they are there. And again, the option on this would be limited to 1 type. And then option 3 is to allow short-term residential rentals with a required stay of 29 consecutive days. So rather than have people coming in for a period of 2 days or 4 days or 5 days, they would be required to stay no less than 29 days. It would be a longer rental period. This could curtail some of the residential rentals in the city because that may not be the desire of those that want to rent. However, complaints can still occur and staff would still need to address that as well. And then option 4 is just to outright prohibit the rentals within the city. Of course, the pro is that it would ease city staff from having to respond to those complaints. We would strictly go out on illegal renters and do enforcement there. And again, the pro would be that there would be no short-term rentals in any residential neighborhoods. And then the con is that if there's any operator out there with a good standing, they would no longer be allowed to operate within the city. So again, the ask is for the council to consider if they want to implement any possible changes to our current regulation. And with that, I'll turn it over to the council for discussion.
Thank you, Ms. Coletta. Ms. Edwards, are there any speaker cards from the public?
Mayor, yes, I have 7 written comments. We also received correspondence. Copies of the correspondence has been provided to the council and will be filed with the meeting minutes. And we also have 4 speaker cards for the item.
Thank you. I think after the speakers, I know that Councilmember Steiner had also written in, I'd like that one to be read in to the public. But if we have speakers, I'd love to hear what they have to say.
All right. Hello, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, and city employees. Thank you for that really good presentation. I'm Marty Wolesky, Corona District 5, and just wanted to share my thoughts on the city's short-term residential rental ordinance. I think for me, quickly just talk about the issue, the real experience as a person who's lived it in our neighborhood, recommendations, and then final thoughts. The way I'm looking at this is, we are one of the most residential communities in the IE, 160,000 residents, and, on the other side of the equation is a $8.4 billion company based in San Francisco, Airbnb. And my question to all of you and to Corona residents is, do Airbnb's goals align with the people and city of Corona? And I think, clearly we need to address this. The localized experience, these are real pictures. The council asked us to take pictures. The city asked us to take pictures and document. These are just a few things that you will see. I ask you to try to put yourself in our situation. Would 50 to 100 different rental situations, or said differently, 1,000 strangers a year, make you feel comfortable? Noise and parties. Do weekday parties, modified exhaust vehicles, revving engines in driveways, and 15-passenger vans align with the Corona Good Neighbor brochure? Parking, we just heard about parking. Here are just some examples. Would this disrupt your neighborhood on a weekly basis? Does this look like it's consistent with the number of individuals that are supposed to be renting these properties? Would you want driveways blocked, fire hydrants blocked? Maintenance, our experience has been absentee owners, clearly not accessible within 45 minutes. And it's obvious, maintenance becomes an issue. It could be a broken mailbox. It could be cans left out when clearly everybody else's cans are in. And it could be trash on the curb. And then, of course, there's been the police calls. And I just want to highlight the times on these slides. One's 2:37 a.m., one is 4:49 a.m., one is 11 p.m. I've mentioned before respect for law enforcement. Do we really want law enforcement focused on policing neighborhood Airbnbs that are turning into more motels or bars and nightclubs? So my recommendation is option 4, a complete ban, which provides a ton of clarity. And who does this support? It supports Corona taxpayers, Corona businesses, Corona neighborhoods, and Corona residents who are afraid to speak up, or maybe they don't know the proper channels to speak up. I am grateful that our neighborhood has used the proper channels to speak up, and I'm thankful for Wes for putting this on today's agenda.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Claire, my house is located at 885 Country Manor Drive. I'm here to tell you my story. Okay, my next neighbor is the house is 865. country manor. Okay, when the owner stuck in the China cannot come back during the pandemic time, their daughter decide to rent the house as an Airbnb. Start that time, I'm suffering all the noisy. Marijuana, that smells so bad. And sometimes when the people come to have a party there, because we have a swimming pool in the backyard, that's the main reason they rent this house. Okay, they want to have a fun, have a drink in the swimming pool. And also, every time they're swimming in the swimming pool, they come with what? The alcohol and loud music. And especially the marijuana, that smell. Even though I close all my windows, I still can smell that. And then that's one time, okay, I sitting in my family room to watch a TV, and suddenly I feel something on my back. When I turn around, you're not gonna believe it. There's a black guy, male, very tall, stare at me. Because they are playing in the backyard, they're playing the basketball. And the ball actually dropped into my yard. Our fence is not that high. If you, for the male, it's very easy to climb up. So if you were me, what would you think? You don't feel safe, security in your house. That's why I'm very simply to tell you my story. I don't think it is a good idea to rent a residential house as an Airbnb just for making the money. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I just want to say thank you so much for putting this on the agenda. You have no idea how much this means to all of us neighbors. It's been a very long and difficult road. A lot of lies were told, threats were made, intimidation tactics were used, all to make a buck. Corona has a short-term rental problem that the city doesn't even know about. There's so many illegally run short-term rentals. It's not as big of a problem as it is in other cities, but the problem still exists, and that could change. We could have a big problem like other cities had. We have parking, which is the same as their issues. We have parties, noise disturbances, constant revolving doors, strangers in neighborhoods, higher crime, lowers property value. One thing that stood out to me the most is that the community doesn't know who to go to for help. Everybody knows to call the police. Everybody knows that if they have an HOA, to call their HOA. If they're in an HOA, they inform them, and the HOAs typically would handle it on their end. But the HOAs are not communicating with the city that, in fact, they were even running illegal or permitted. It doesn't matter. The fact is that they've had problems, and the city thinks that all the ones that are not complained with directly to them is in good standing, when that's not necessarily the case. It just means that the city is unaware of it. There's so many Southern California cities that have banned STRs for these same reasons over and over again. I'm reading it, I'm watching it on YouTube, all that. Santa Monica went to the Ninth Circuit courts, and the courts upheld their ban. Heavy fines, I think, are the most important out of all of it if it's banned, because it discourages violators. For instance, I spoke to Fountain Valley, and they have fines that are per incident, and they don't give warnings, because your permit process or the fact that you know it's banned is your warning. They charge $1,500 per instance. That's for advertising and operating. So that's a total of $3,000 a day. Second offense, $3,000 each. Third offense, $5,000. Irvine, same. $1,500 for the first instance, $6,000 for the second, and $10,000 for the third instance. And then after that, if it continues, they go to court They do criminal charges against them. So that's where we are. They all employ a third-party vendor to scrub the internet to look for these rentals. So I just want to say thank you so much. We appreciate it. It's on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Hello, Joe Morgan, 2063 Ren. It's great that you guys got this going so fast. I don't think I've ever seen anything move along through the process this quickly. It was interesting to hear that the 73,000 is the annual take. It's not much, and if you figure just the expenses that have been incurred chasing after Wasatch, probably is more than takes out whatever we brought in from all the short-term rentals in the city. You know, if you think of the staff time and how many times the PD showed up, you know, the amount of time has been taken up just over trying to process this problem. It, you know, the $73,000 just went bye-bye. Hearing early on what was going on here, it's clear this is like another problem that we have where the violations mostly take place after hours. Code is in charge of enforcing it, but it's not during hours when code is on duty. And PD handles it just like a typical neighbor call because they're not really identified and they're not held to a standard like a business, and there's no real connection for PD to even handle this. It's just we have the same problem on construction sites. Somebody goes out and starts work at 5 o'clock in the morning. It'd usually be a building thing, but it falls on the PD, and so there's, you know, it's not a real solid link for them to know what to document, how to document it. That their encounter at 2 o'clock in the morning with a rental automatically gets tallied for the enforcement side. The process doesn't work. It doesn't fit together very well. So, you know, that if you're going to keep them, there needs to be a clear set of understandings about what's a violation and who's going to enforce it. And if we're going to do it, we're probably going to need somebody to be working those hours. You know, it's not something, or, you know, specifically charge a PD with it, which they're probably not going to be super happy about that. You know, having to go out of their, you know, regular enforcement field to basically, you know, do more civil stuff. But there needs to be a clear set of standards if you're going to keep them. Honestly, we should just kill them. Done. It doesn't bring much benefit. By my calculations, it was 1,800 total in the city, 1,800 rental nights that we got paid for. You know, it seems like a cleaner deal to just go, no, we're not going to have these, and then you could just, you know, just kill them all. If, you know, you hear one of them, they're gone. I can't imagine that any of you or anybody else in this room would like it if one was next to their house. I can't imagine. We're much more careful about how we locate businesses by code. You would never put a C2 or a C3 immediately adjacent to a house. We don't do that anywhere else. I don't know why we do this now. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Edwards, is there any more speaker cards?
Mayor, we do not have any more speaker cards.
Okay, like I said earlier, Councilmember Steiner is on his way back. He'll be here for later tonight, but he did submit his comments, and I think that it's probably something that we'd all like to hear. So if you could read those in.
Okay. To my city council colleagues, since I am unable to be with you in person today, I want to make sure you knew my position on short-term rentals. I think it's safe to say that most of our residents, including myself, do not want short-term rentals next door to our homes or in our neighborhoods. I have read through the presentation and strongly support option 4. It's time to get out of the short-term rental business. Respectfully, Councilmember Steiner.
Thank you. Councilmember Speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you all for coming, and thank you all for continuing to let us know how you feel and expressing your concern. I've checked with multiple areas in the city, and Dina had been nice enough to provide me with some contacts of folks in other parts of the city that are having the same issue, and I kind of see this as two things. One, I hearing and seeing and really hearing, because I don't live that far away, So when I would get an email, I'd drive them up, I would park behind the house and kind of listen, and they're 100% right. These are hotels. People go on vacation to have a good time. I'm not mad at the people that are there. They're renting a hotel. So they're going there to have a good time. They're going there to listen to music and play outside and jump in the hotel pool and do hotel stuff. The problem is that we don't allow hotels in residential zones, and this shouldn't be there either. I 100% think housing is for people, and we don't have a huge issue here. We don't have a large number of rentals on short-term rentals. But I do believe as these become profitable, that they could be in a position to actually to impact the number of houses either for sale or for rent in the city. And I think that housing should be for people to live in, not to vacation in. So therefore, I am 100% in favor of option number 4. And thank you, Dina, for sharing, what other cities are doing. I know that enforcement is regardless if they're here and they're permitted and they're allowed or not, we still have to enforce. So I love the idea of increasing the penalties. Therefore, at least if someone does get caught doing this, that at least it helps pay back some of our fees. $100 is a chance that that someone's going to take, or $500 or $1,000 to do a rental where you could make several $1,000s in a couple of days. So I would love to see is when we bring this back to find ways to either equal. Irvine seems to. I read theirs in detail yesterday and really liked it. And I like the way that they enforce it. Curious about what this third party does, and especially if they're fining people for even the advertising part. So we're not having to chase when we hear complaints. There may be an opportunity for it to at least offset. So I'm curious to see what that is, and I'm like I said, fully in favor of option 4.
Councilmember Casillas.
Yes, thank you. I want to thank everyone who's here today. I know it's not easy to make it down during the workday and at 3 o'clock, so I appreciate you all being here and then speaking at the mic, which is also very difficult. So, and your continuous emails and engagement. I have a whole folder in my inbox that is dedicated to your communication. So thank you for getting involved. I do have a question, Ms. Coletta. I was a little confused about what the terminology, the no less than 29 days. What does this mean in comparison to like month-to-month rentals?
So for us, a short-term rental is anything 30 days or less, and the city is allowed to collect a TOT on that. If you have a rental that is more than 30 days, it's no longer considered a transient use. That is the difference.
Okay, wonderful, because I do believe that there is a need for month-to-month rentals, and I want to make sure that that's not being impacted by this. I'm in agreement. I don't see the need for short-term rentals. In fact, in addition to the disruption that they're causing in these neighborhoods, there's a real market disruption to short-term rentals, and housing and affordability is a real issue in California. So I take issue with Airbnb separate and apart, although this is a really big deal that our residents are here. But on top of these complaints, the fact that it's just a disturbance. And then, a simple Airbnb and VRBO search will show that we have much more than 13 rentals in the city of Corona. So I am also in favor of option 4, but I would really like to explore a much higher fine, and I'd love us to take a look at this third-party vendor that can ideally take some of the task from staff to scrub these illegally marketed short-term rentals off the internet. So, thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
I wish you owls would have brought signs and wave them. But nicely done, by the way. And I'd like to thank Salt Lake Steiner for weighing in with his comments. Very appreciated if you're listening, Steiner. I'm option 4. I do like option 3, and I'll give you one reason why I do like option 3 is option 3 tends to be geared towards insurance companies. So if you have a fire in your house or a flood and you have to move out of your house, you could go into a 30-day rental. It's people not trying to party. It's people that just their house is burned down or they've had a big flood and they need somewhere else to live. I think these are quiet people. They're not the party animals. So I could go option 3 for that reason, or I could just go option 4 and be done with it. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Having grown up in Anaheim where my mom still lives and having to see the bad side of short-term rentals, I'm option 4 as well. So I think that's pretty clear direction. And so I want to address something. Vice Mayor let me know that there was a bunch of comments that were written in. And once again, that was my decision to not have them written in this time or read in this time. I don't want anyone else to get blamed. That was my decision because I felt that we were moving in the right direction. Don't want to discount it, but it was my decision. So if you're mad, come talk to me.
There's 3 Ds in Daddario?
3, lots of Ds.
3,
His
lots
email?
of Ds.
Yep.
When emailing Tony?
Yep.
3 Ds in Daddario.
Yep.
Tony
That's right.
Daddario.
That being said, the adjournment, I'm going to adjourn this meeting till the next meeting, which is City Council tonight at 6:30. Thank you.